Hello. So, I just got back from Colorado, and I have an interesting idea that I want to share. So something I've been realizing is that, so I've been exploring schizophrenia a lot, and what I've basically been finding is that people who are schizophrenic, what's really going on is, I think, or at least commonly what's usually going on, is that they get into some situation that they lack social support. So some of the genes, for example, are involved in exploration. And I think, so there's some studies that show this exploratory tendency, like openness to experience, is the trait they call it, openness to experience. So what they find is that people with this trait are more likely to have more good and more bad experiences because they're going to have more experiences in general, and that makes sense. And so if you think about this means they are going to be more likely to be traumatized than other people. And what's interesting is that the gene involved in this openness trait, it has been shown to increase trauma sensitivity. Now, I think what happens is that normally we can cope with bad experiences by going to our social group and getting support. We can relate to people, they can give us advice, they can support us and give us a kind of a net to fall on if anything goes wrong. But the thing is, with the exploratory personality trait, I think you're likely to experience things that other people haven't experienced if they don't have this trait. So that means people can't relate to you when they see you. When you try new things, if you're trying things that are kind of outside the box of normal society, you will inevitably have to go through trial and error. Now, that means you have to inevitably face error. When you face error, other people will see that, and this is exactly why they aren't open in the first place. They aren't open because they don't want to make any mistakes. They don't want to take that risk of trying something new because of that error. They can mess up. If they try to become an entrepreneur, they can lose all their money, for example. It's known that the entrepreneurial lifestyle is risky, right? Okay, so that's one part of it. Then there's also, let me think. Once you start making the errors, your identity kind of becomes the mistake maker. People won't trust your judgment and a lot of stuff like that. You will be seen differently. You will, if you develop a bunch of traits based on your experiences are inevitably different than other people's, and you will become a different type of person. People are naturally tribal, and you will be rejected from the tribe because you do not match their qualities. Now, so I think this gene makes you much more likely to get in a situation where you don't have a regular support system. And I think it also makes you more likely to think up crazy ideas like conspiracy or whatever else, like whatever the typical psychotic type thinking is. But I think once you get isolated, there's a number of effects that occur. So there's a couple things. We know that the size of your social network makes you more pain resistant. The more people that you have makes you less sensitive to pain. And it's thought that this is due to the fact that socializing is mediated partly by opioid hormones. And there are positive opioid hormones and negative ones. And so basically, when you do something good, you get rewarded by people, they accept you more, and it feels good. And then on the other hand, when you do something bad, people will reject you, and you will be seen badly, right? And it'll feel badly. And so now, just with that alone, think about what happens when you're diagnosed as a schizophrenic. People are going to look at you as weird, think that you can't think straight, that you're essentially stupid, or that your judgments aren't to be trusted. Not even your perception is to be trusted. You are the person who makes crazy, stupid judgments. Now, what's interesting is that the negative feedback opioid hormone, the one that kind of punishes you, is capable of chemically causing the two major theories of schizophrenia. That's something that I've been realizing. The dopamine and glutamate hypothesis can both be kind of bound together by what that hormone does. And so that's really interesting. And that hormone's involved in trauma, and we know that people who get traumatized are more likely to be schizophrenic. And yeah, okay, so the next thing is there's another hormone, tachykinins, which increase a lot of paranoia and different behavioral things that we see in psychosis, and blocking this can act as an antipsychotic. And things that block that other hormone can also act as antipsychotic. And this tachykinins is related with being socially isolated for up to 2 weeks, for example. You start to get aggressive, irritable, and ruminate on negative things. And I think it's because when you socialize, people can get you out of that funk. Like, the advice even is supporting, and it feels good. It feels good that people care about you. It could feel good that you're meaningful to other people. And so I think what often happens is people who are more exploratory are inevitably more likely to get into a situation where they lose their social support. Let's say you're a Christian, you are more likely to become an atheist if you were exploratory. If you were going outside of the Christian culture and looking at different things, that is the person who will become the atheist, and then you will lose your support from people. You will be seen as a bad person. So there's that. And then there's borderline personality. This is where it gets interesting. I think borderline personality is really people who are on the verge of psychosis. But what we see with people with borderline is that they get clingy, they get stuck on one person, they get codependent. Usually people who are traumatized will also be borderline, so it kind of goes back into that. And this isn't necessarily a new conception of what borderline is. People, I believe that the name borderline actually refers to this, that you're on the borderline of psychosis and normal. And I think what happens is they find one person who will still support them, and they channel all of their needs into that person, and they tend to overwhelm them, which can cause them to leave them, which will cause the borderline to experience psychotic symptoms again. Essentially, something like opioid withdrawal symptoms. And then they will seek out more people, get desperate, and cling to those people, and keep doing this and overwhelming the people, driving more people away. This is kind of like how it goes. Now, I think what social media is doing to us is generating something very much like borderline personality in all of us. I think they are causing us to become codependent with their platform so that we will keep using it to escape these restless, crazy, kind of opioid withdrawal symptoms. And it's very interesting because I think they're designed to not fully fulfill our needs so that we will continuously need to socialize. And I think this is something we have to change. In the past, I've talked about how we could actually abolish borderline traits by changing the newsfeed algorithm and friend suggestion feature of Facebook. We could analyze people's personality types, which is already done, like that openness to experience I mentioned, that is measurable on Facebook. They can predict highly accurately whether how much of that trait you possess. Now, imagine that you were to group people up based on how satisfied they would be. Now, even just that concept alone, imagine that we were to create algorithms in social media that were geared towards maximizing happiness rather than maximizing usage. Because right now they maximize how much time we are on the screen rather than maximizing our well-being, which might have us come off the screen. It's kind of like with something like heroin, people are seemingly trying to fulfill some need, like say their life is falling apart and that makes them very uncomfortable. They can turn to heroin and feel comfortable, but then they realize that their life is still falling apart and their anxiety kind of creeps over the level that the drug is able to help with. And I think Facebook is designed to satisfy some needs and tickle that part of our brain without satisfying us. And it's kind of creepy to think about that it could be that Facebook is built to engineer borderline traits and keep us all on that kind of edge of going mad and isolated type symptoms. Now, what's interesting though is I don't think that it's really so close to the edge. I think it's just to the point that we would keep using. I think borderline in its natural environment is usually worse. And well, that gets tricky. I think a lot of the behaviors on Facebook we see, like people fighting, people getting crazy and negative, people seemingly desperate for likes and attention. And because of that, they will make a lot of clickbaity kind of headlines in their posts. I think that's kind of the cry for attention that we see in borderline. But I think that I don't necessarily think that if we stop using Facebook, we'll go psychotic or anything like that. I think that, and what I've noticed is actually that I noticed online people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia. I've interacted with a lot of them in my own personal journey of trying to explore what it is. And what I've seen is that a lot of these people, it's very strange that they're even diagnosed. They seem really well off. None of them are really incoherent. A lot of them are intelligent and seemingly functional, except it seems like they probably don't live a normal life, like they don't have a job or something like that. And they probably go online and use this to treat their disorder. Then once they would try to go back into the real world, they're surrounded by people who they've already ruined their reputation with, people who think they're crazy, people who look down upon them. Probably, like if you think about that exploratory tendency again, who are the children that are likely to be punished? They are the ones that aren't following the traditional paths and the rules set by their parents. They are the people with openness to experience. So, okay, I'm starting to lose my train of thought. But intense manic ramble, right? I might end up stopping almost here, but I think social media does treat people enough to where people who are psychotic would actually be better off using social media. I don't think better off enough. I think they will still suffer aggressiveness, paranoid symptoms, and I think the paranoia is why people act aggressive online, and they get paranoid of people's intentions when it's text only. I don't think it's just the lack of feedback. I think that's part of it. Like the lack of facial expression feedback and stuff like that, or nonverbal feedback. Like people usually bring that up. But I think there's also this kind of biological mechanism with the tachykinins that have already been shown to increase aggression when you're isolated. And I've personally noticed this. The more isolated I get really edgy, and it's almost like I don't want to even come out of the isolation because I'll just get really irritable and stuff like that, you know? But it's very interesting because if you look at Facebook, like, so people would talk about 4chan. I don't know if you've heard of 4chan. They would talk about this website as being prone to increasing people's craziness of behavior. Now, 4chan really is that place for the most isolated, rejected people of society. Like, that's why the alt-right was going to 4chan, because those are people who are rejected. No one likes the alt-right, right? So, but it was also a place for just rejects in general, like people who were bullied and different things like that, people who have weird fetishes, people who are homosexual, people who are transgender even probably. So there's like a lot of that in 4chan. Now, 4chan has been considered very hostile. They've pinned it down to being an anonymous place, and that being anonymous allows you to free yourself and express all the most negative things because no one can come back, bring it back to you and ruin your life, right? And like, in essence, that's what 4chan was. The alt-right people know that they're rejected, and so they can go vent on this anonymous forum. And people think that being anonymous kind of breeds your ability to be hateful and trollish and stuff like that. But I don't think it's necessarily that. I mean, that could be part of it. I think the anonymous factor would drag people who are already like that. So that's a factor. But then there's something like Facebook, which is essentially your internet social security number. Like, really, it really is your they know so much about you that even if you were to tell someone your life story, I feel like that might not even do it justice. They probably know you better than you know yourself. And so, and that's pretty freaky, right? But anyways, now people act worse on Facebook than they do on Reddit. On Reddit, if you were to act really aggressive and argumentative, you will get shut down and put to the bottom. There's this kind of etiquette, Reddit etiquette, that you have to follow in order for people to give you likes. That's not true on Facebook. People will act however they want, essentially. Now, like, we could see people posting hate on Facebook much more frequently and angry posts, but on Reddit, everyone has to be polite and kind and nice and positive and stuff like that. And it's very interesting because Reddit is actually completely anonymous. Facebook, not so. So there we can say that anonymousness does not breed these traits. But instead, what if Facebook is designed to make you feel perpetually in need of socializing so that it could increase user usage. Now, Reddit, I feel, can increase usage because there's so much interesting things on it. It's actually inherently interesting. Facebook gets really repetitious. We see the same posts over and over. And I honestly, when I scroll through Facebook, it's not that appealing, like the kind of posts I see. There's a lot of things that are reposts from Reddit even. And so I think the way that Facebook increases usage is actually through making people addicted, like how I've already outlined before. I think that they are engineering people to be more dependent, and I think their dependency for social validation and acceptance is kind of causing tribalism to the highest degree. It's causing people to what I would call Universe 25 themselves. And so, if you don't know Universe 25, there was this mouse utopia experiment where they got 4 mice and a huge, massive place where mice could do lots of things. They had unlimited food, water, and kind of unlimited space. Space was not an issue at the point when problems emerged, at least. And so what happened is the mice would breed. They got to the number 2,700 in population, and then that's when they declined to extinction. So even as the population declined, they didn't level off. They didn't become secure. They continued to decline all the way to extinction. Now, what's interesting with that is, so they developed tribalism. They developed sexual-based tribalism, and the mice began to increasingly act isolated, despite the fact that they were more exposed to people than ever. Now that's pretty freaky, because that sounds a lot like what Facebook allows us to do. It kind of breaks us free from the confines of our geological prisons that we're stuck to our geography. That is no longer true. Now we are free to explore as many people that exist on Facebook, an unlimited resource of people. I think in some sense it's like it inflates the value, like how our economy and our cash value can be inflated when we print more money. Though I don't know so much about that. But anyways, going back, let's go back to rat experiments. So what we've seen with drug experiments is that the mice who are trapped in a cage with 2 sources of water, a drug water and a clean water, they will choose the drug water and dose until they kill themselves. They will overdose. They will get addicted and keep dosing until death. And so people were suspicious of this experiment, so a new experiment came out called Rat Park. This one, they had the same setup, except they had a massive amount of space and a lot of things to do for the mice, like, or rats. They had, like, toys and a lot of other mice, which I think is critical. So they had a social environment. And so these mice did not dose until they die. They actually used in moderation. And that's really interesting because it even ties back to those biological mechanisms I mentioned with things like schizophrenia, that dynorphin hormone, the fact that there seems to be a correlation with opioid activity in the brain and your social network size, that you are more pain resistant the more the larger your social network is. And that's where it gets interesting. But what if what happens when there's too many mice? It starts to flip, and now there's a different effect where this society declines and the mice begin to act isolated again. And what if what happens in this Universe 25 experiment is that the mice slowly decline back into a schizophrenic type state? What if originally what begins to happen is that some mice don't find a place to belong, and those mice eventually grow in numbers because there's already a built tribal system that there's not enough room for people, and then the rejected people would become more aggressive. And then that's why, I don't know if I mentioned, but in this Universe 25, the tribalism breaks out into violence. They stop having sex, and they become increasingly aggressive, and the lack of sex obviously leads to their extinction, and it never recovers despite the declining population, and it doesn't even recover if you remove the mice from the environment. They would take 8 of the mice, put them in a new tank, and they would still not reproduce. Now that's pretty scary. That means that their culture was ruined, that they no longer could recover from the state that they were in, the social state. Now, I think that this state is much like what social media is doing to us, and this is why we need to fix it fast. We need to maybe keep the people who didn't have as much exposure to these addictive technologies, and I don't know, I think we can actually escape it without going towards extinction. I think humans are going to do a lot better than mice, but I think it's very fascinating because I think the end product is a schizophrenic society. And that might be why we have Donald Trump right now, that there are enough people who have already been Universe 25'd, and now we have a crazy leader. I'm going to end it right there. I hope I gave you a bunch of interesting ideas. I'm probably going to turn this into a YouTube or podcast episode. But here's the Instagram live version. I hope you have an awesome day, and don't let yourself become Universe 25'd. Take a break, go experience real socializing, especially if you're irritable or getting paranoid. Talk to people about how you feel paranoid. Talk to people about it in real life. Have a nice day, and goodbye. Even chat with me. I am pretty isolated a lot of the time, actually. I socialize with a lot of people, a lot of strangers. I don't really have a tribe, though, at this point, and it's kind of hard to even find a tribe when I'm constantly exploring these kind of topics. Like, it's not like I have a bunch of people who are as into these topics as me, so I'm kind of just like inherently going to be more alone. But I can talk about normal things, politics. I can help you with your ideas if you're looking for them. You can show me things that I don't know because I'm not involved in your universe. And yeah, so goodbye.